So everybody has a story as to why they do what they do, and I don't know. I just thought it'd be cool to kind of talk about why I collect physical media and a couple things that are in the collection that sort of defend why I love it so much. So just dive into my history, I guess. So I was born in 1991, and my mom had always been a big horror fan. She loved Friday 13th. She loved Nightmare on Elm Street. The Exorcist was her favorite, and The Exorcist was actually the first movie that scared the shit out of me. It did. I mean, it haunted me so bad that it took me until I was like 25 to rewatch it, and it just like obviously still not as scary, but I just have this nostalgic fear for that movie. I just it's like ingrained inside of me. But we had a pretty generous VHS collection growing up, and all kinds of movies. We had all the Disney stuff, the big clamshell boxes and that kind of stuff. But I remember specifically being older, probably around 99, 2000, having a pretty good collection. Spike Lee's Summer of Sam was one that we had. That was a constant rewatch. I actually have somewhere around here some of my favorite movies still on VHS. One of them being Jurassic Park, which this is still my VHS from when I was a kid. I told this in a previous story. My best friend, who I'm still friends with, actually borrowed this from me, or I brought it over there, and he gave it to me as a birthday gift. So this was super cool to kind of have back. This is the original one that I had as a kid, and it's my favorite film of all time. And then this, unfortunately, is not the original that I had, but I found this at a Goodwill, and I was like, yo, I remember having this as a kid, and that is the Tape for the Lost World with that lenticular insert in there. And, man, I loved, as a kid, The Lost World just as much as I loved Jurassic Park. And to kind of have this back, and it's just a super clean copy, and besides a couple rips and tears, this just brings it back for me, this art, this style. And then I remember, I think we were going to a family party, and we passed a drugstore. I can't remember if it was like a CVS or an Eckerd, and they had this big display talking about the VHS release of Jurassic Park 3. And that had this, the poster art was that kind of steel sheet on it, and it had this cool shimmer to it. And I remember asking my mom to buy it for me, and I don't think she did. I think I ended up taking it from a friend's house or something. That's how I ended up owning it for a little while. But when it came time for me to start collecting on my own, it was DVDs. And at that point, we had Kmart's. I grew up in New Jersey, so we had Kmart's. We had stores like that to kind of go to and shop, but they were expensive. They were really expensive. And I remember very clearly one time, I was working with a family friend who was doing junk removal and stuff, and I was making a couple bucks. And one of the first movies that I remember being really excited about owning on DVD, one that I bought my own, which I don't have the DVD of, but it was actually Zack Snyder's Dawn of the Dead. And it was the poster art, the orange poster art. And I, at the time, had not seen George Romero's Dawn of the Dead. I mean, 2004 when this came out, I was 13, around that 13, maybe turning 14 at that point. So I had not seen George Romero's Dawn of the Dead yet, and I fell in love with that movie. And I remember one of my favorite parts was feeling so excited that there was an unrated director's cut. It almost felt like I shouldn't have this, right? Oh man, I should not be having this. This is something that belongs in my parents should have locked away. And that's what it felt like to me. And I owned it and I loved it. I watched all the bonus features. I remember there's a bonus feature on there that talks about I think it's called Anatomy of Splitting Heads, and they do all of the effects, the blowing, the squibs, and all that stuff. And I just absolutely obsessed, and I fell in love. And at a point when I had moved out of my parents, I think I had about 100 DVDs or so, and I'm talking like this is fresh out of high school, like 2011, 2010 when I graduated. And I continued buying DVDs. I would go to a couple of there were a couple like pawn shops. There was one in particular where called Action Video. It's actually in right outside of Defford, and they had this whole entire wall of DVDs. And I would go and I would like trade in 5, and buy 5. And I was just a young kid just collecting and watching movies. And actually, right about the time I met Erica, I'd started investing a little bit more into Blu-rays and stuff. I never really had a job that allowed me to go full bore collecting like I can now. So everything was a little bit tougher. I loved going to stores and looking at the Blu-ray sections, and I've always just been a giant, movie fan, obsessed with movies. So, when I met her, I really started taking collecting serious because I was introduced to a couple different areas like boutique labels and stuff like that. And now it's been, I've been seriously collecting for about probably like 4 or 5 years now. And it's just like opened up a world that I didn't even know would ever exist. And the movie fan in me is so happy to just be surrounded by labels that put love and care into their releases and love the movies as much as I love owning them. And it's an expensive thing, but it's one of my favorite things to do. It's something I'm so proud of, which is why I started the Instagram. And I had friends on YouTube that I was friends with on Instagram, and I was like, oh man, I finally just want to talk movies. And I had to kind of like build up the confidence to do that. But I have a couple of things behind me that are pretty solid examples as to why I love physical media and why it's so important to me. And honestly, there's a lot. One of them being a more recent release. And for those who don't know, Umbrella Entertainment is now a partner label with Vinegar Syndrome for US releases. And the first one that they put out was this cool Australian zombie film called Undead. Right, check this out. Super sweet artwork here. And I actually owned this on DVD. The DVD cover was orange, and it was our character with the shotgun and a gas mask on, and the transfer was bad on DVD. Everything was like as bright, vibrant orange as possible, and I love that movie. I ran that disc until it pretty much fell apart. So when this got announced, the Blu-ray of this film, I just remember being like, what? Like, it was so shocking. I was actually out with Erica when this got announced, and I was like, are you kidding me? Like, really? This movie? And to get this release is just incredible. To be holding this in my hand and thinking about, man, I remember having this DVD, and now it's, however many years later, and having this big, thick, heavy Blu-ray release of it that has a booklet and all kinds of new features, and even the archival features that I used to watch on the old DVD. It's such a crazy feeling. Like, I don't even know how to explain it unless you're in the space and you have the movies that you collected a long time ago that are now getting new releases. It's really hard to explain, kind of honestly, like what that feels like. And the same goes for things like, it's 2023 and we have this. Look at this Roadhouse release. I mean, come on. Like, I guess another Vinegar Syndrome, but this thing, magnet box, it opens up, you have a slip cover in here, there's all kinds of new bonus features. I mean, I never thought I would see, and I'm not a huge Roadhouse fan. I actually kind of became a bigger Roadhouse fan once this came out. I watched it again after years. I was like, holy shit, this movie's awesome. But this is incredible, and there are so many films that deserve this treatment, and it's just awesome to see custom, brand new commissioned artwork you have on the front, the back, actually all over this thing. We have a slipcover, booklet, all these new features. I mean, it's insane, and this is a 4K release, so this is a brand new restoration of this film, meaning if there were any issues with the original film as far as quality or the sustainability of it, because stuff falls apart over time and it kind of gets lost, which is why there's a lot of stuff that we still struggle to get new transfers of. It's now digitally stored in 4K with a great grain structure, with a great look. And, you know, you just have stuff like this that's killer, you know, and companies just putting so much passion into what they do. And one of them being this here, A24 with Robert Eggers' The Lighthouse. This is a recent 4K release. And this thing is huge. I mean, let me put it up against your regular, you know, Blu-ray here. It's giant. They've done this for Midsommar. They've done this for Last Black Man in San Francisco. They did it for The Green Knight. But, you know, this slides out like this. I'm sure you've seen unboxings. And then you have this. And you open it up and you get this book full of photos and prints and concept arts and production design notes and storyboards. I mean, the love and care, you know, there's a point where it begins to become art, right? Film is art, movies are art, and then these releases are art. I mean, this is incredible. When this came in, I was in, well, when it got announced, I was like, I didn't even hesitate to order this, but I remember it coming in and I was like, holy crap, man, like, you know, putting this on the shelf, I'm like, this is why I love collecting. And even further than that, a grail that I personally have in my collection is the Hellraiser Scarlet box. And this is Hellraiser 1, 2, and 3. There's a book in here. There's exclusive art cards. I mean, this thing is packed. And as far as collecting goes, this is sort of one of those grail pieces, you know? And I remember when I got this for stupid cheap from a lady who was selling all of her husband's stuff. So I got this for a really, really, really dumb price. But I look at this, and this was a little bit more towards the beginning of my serious collecting. And I'm like, I love this. This is why. Like, when people ask me, why do you collect physical media? You know, why do you put money into it? This is why. I mean, this release is beautiful, and it's just jam-packed, and there's so much cool art in here. And I love Hellraiser 1 and 2. I think Hellraiser 3 is fine. But this is just, you know, it's awesome. And all of this stuff. Arrow putting out the limited edition boxes. They just announced one for the Lighthouse. They keep putting out these cool editions. So much love goes into the packaging, into the presentation. And it's beautiful when you just look at, you know, releases like this. And outside of the big releases, another important thing with physical media is supporting small horror. Horror is a genre that has always been kind of the bottom of the totem pole. And one thing that we've learned over the last couple of years, I should say, is that horror is leading the box office. It's making huge impact to the point where major studios are investing more into horror than ever before because of the ROI, because of the return on investment. You can make a very good horror film for very cheap, and if you have a good marketing campaign, if you have a good crew behind it, you can make a lot of money off of it. And people might say, like, the money doesn't matter, but in film it does, because that's why we get franchises, that's why we get series, because they make money. But also it allows creators, it allows directors to explode onto the scene and continue making films. I mean, look at Barbarian exploded. Another example from this last year was Parker Finn with Smile. This guy has been all over the news. He made the short film, I think it's called Laura Hasn't Slept. It was now converted into Smile, which had one of the best marketing campaigns in a long time, probably arguably since the Blair Witch Project, which started viral marketing for films. And Smile made so much money. Parker Finn is now like signing multi-film contracts with Paramount, being able to, you know, create more of his visions and put them out. And people showed up for that. Even more so, I mean, look at what happened this year with small horror and Terrifier 2. I mean, come on. Terrifier. I remember this was hard to find, right? This was pretty hard to find. But Terrifier 2 hit the scene, and I think this did, in the couple weekends that it was out, the couple weeks that it was out, $10 million at the box office. $10 million. I mean, absolutely blew it away. Did incredible, like, just ridiculous numbers for small horror that's not like it's over the top. It's way gorier than most studios would ever put out. The content here is crazy, and as a horror lover, I freaking loved every single second of it. But this was so against the grain. This was not supposed to be as successful as it was. And now I just saw Art the Clown has he's a downloadable character in WWE, the video game, and the 2K23, and he's everywhere. I mean, I walked into a Hot Topic and I bought a Terrifier t-shirt. Like, this blew up. People showed up, and it was kind of like the little movie that could but shouldn't, and it did. And it was in newspapers. The New York Post, I saw an article about it. Washington Post, all kinds of newspapers were like, this is the grossest movie ever, but it's making just a ton of money. And now it's got this really cool Blu-ray release, and it's just like, horror is, it's just crushing it, you know? It's absolutely crushing it. And yes, I would consider this smaller horror. It's not a major studio production, you know, but it's just, it's crushing it, and it's setting a new standard for horror. But it's also reigniting the passion for young guerrilla style filmmakers to keep making movies, because now you have the chance to get out there, and you have the chance to grow and make movies. And even if you want to talk about a couple very small titles, you know, things like Slash Lorette Party. I was part of the Tapehead Massacre, and the director was nice enough to sign this copy that I bought. Very small horror, and it's cool. It's a really cool movie. Then you have stuff like most recent Kill Her Goats, which has had a crazy marketing campaign, right? Absolutely crazy. This movie's all over the place. It's got tons of Facebook ads and comments and people buying it, and you know, you have Kane Hodder in there, and you have Playmates in the cast, and I mean, it's a really fun time for a film. I mean, supporting small horror with the no productions. This movie's kind of crushing it in the sales category right now, and I'm super happy to see it. And then you have stuff like, you know, this is director Stephen Mena, you know, Malevolence, the Malevolence trilogy. I got all three of these films, they're actually here behind me, shipped, signed, and it's just, you know, supporting small horror and supporting them through physical media, right? They spend a couple dollars on the case, they create some cool art, they put it onto a disc, and then they're selling through Etsy or through whatever platform they can, even just, you know, Facebook and Instagram marketing like you're seeing with Killer Goats or a lot of that stuff, right? And they're able to make the money to continue doing what they do and continue making small horror. And it's super, super cool. And all of those reasons are very minuscule in the long list of why I love collecting physical media. But as a horror fan, as a collector, I love this shit. Love it. I get the thought of, like, today, the day that I am recording this, at some point I will be going to Best Buy, and I am so freaking excited. I love the thought of collecting movies and buying movies. And that's you know, what this channel is based on. That's what the Instagram is based on. Every single person I talk to about movies, you know, the love and the fire that I have, I hope that it continuously comes through. And, you know, I hope that all of us on this platform, everybody on Instagram who talks about physical media, you know, continues to support horror. I hope the labels continue to put love. We're seeing labels who are taking some shortcuts and stuff, and, you know, it is what it is. But there are labels that are truly out to put out good stuff, and they love what they do. We need to continue supporting them. We need to continue talking about them. We need to continue talking about horror as a genre. We need to keep this alive, and we just need to talk about it. So that is why I collect physical media, and I'm never going to stop, ever in my life.